Hello, welcome to FPL the Onion episode 23. It's the usual lineup tonight. Myself, Shlee, and Nick. How's it going, Nick?
Very good, thank you, Mr. Shlee. Very good. I'm feeling pretty good at the moment. The sun is shining, the weather is warm, and we have the FPL season is almost upon us, even though it felt like it never really went away.
I know, it's pretty mad, isn't it? Yeah, we're in the middle of a heat wave in the UK here, which is quite nice. I'm a bit pooped from work today, but we are here again on the eve of fixture releases tomorrow. So we were just saying it's very much thinking last chance to talk about the season just gone, and I think tomorrow Twitter certainly and maybe our heads over the next couple of days are going to be thinking about, right, what does this mean for it's quite a nice way of doing it. I don't think I've ever been that engaged in the pre-season, but the fixtures come out and okay, you haven't got the prices, but you're already going to think, right, Leicester have got a great start or something, Maddison maybe's in there, or Haaland, is he actually going to have this Bournemouth fixture that might have been leaked? Is that actually going to happen? Apparently that's not happening. So the latest on Twitter seems to be. You've been following this?
Yeah, a little bit, but again, I'm not too concerned about it until it actually happens. But I have seen some. There's been a bit of chat on Andy's Slack channel, like a lot less chat than during the season. But a couple of guys just noticing, just saying like this season already. Obviously, we're not in the season yet, but the preseason, there's people making draft teams when there aren't even prices and there aren't even fixtures, and just saying how the game seems to be. For whatever reason, it's reached this tipping point now where it's going absolutely mad. Like people are so interested in it. It's reaching some sort of weird fever pitch. And I don't know where it goes from here really, but I'm certainly much more engaged than I've ever been, even though I would always consider myself pretty engaged. But yeah, it's gone a bit mad recently.
Yeah, agreed. And what was it? Spurs v Southampton apparently is a rumour. Spurs at home, so that'd be pretty tasty. But blimey, yeah, the fact I'm talking about two fixtures when they might not even be true. Let's just wait till tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't, I quite like looking back at the previous season, although I think as we're going to talk about tonight, it gets to the point where, it is nice that the fixtures come out tomorrow and that we're going to have the game's going to launch next week, so we can definitely be looking forward. But yeah, in terms of just guessing which fixtures are going to be in game week 1, I'm definitely on the side of just waiting to see what happens.
Yeah. So the plan for this episode is, I must admit in my head, and especially after last week, I was thinking we would do a few more season review stuff, and we sort of will do that. But I think we both had quite a busy week, and so we've taken the foot off the gas a little bit on that. One thing we have got is a little look at chips from last season with ourselves compared to some elite managers. So I think that'd be quite interesting just to see what we did, because certainly come the end of the episode as well, Nick and I have drawn up a list which we didn't sort of confer over of what we're going to do differently next season compared to this season, and one for me is chip, so that will sort of feed into that quite nicely. And then in the middle we got a few Twitter bits, and as you can already tell, we're probably going to go off the cuff a little bit thinking about the new season as and when.
Have you seen any? I know there's some good stuff here from FPL Twitter, but did you see Praz's his kind of analysis of how people tend to pick their first drafts? I thought it was absolutely spot on. It was exactly how I've done it in the past.
Right. What did he do? I didn't see.
I retweeted it from the FPL the Onion Twitter account to have a look at it afterwards. But he basically says, you auto select a team, kind of get your ID and then save it and think, I'm not going to look at this for a few weeks. And then by like the next day you're looking at it, you're thinking about kind of the best prices for defenders, and so you go big in terms of value, so you go big at the back. Then you see a draft on Twitter, and it's talking about defenses that rotate really well. So suddenly you've downgraded that big at the back to like 2 rotating 4-5s, and he's like one of those 4-5s will become a 4.0 who you've noticed has played a few games in preseason.
Yeah,
it's just like this wonderful. It's so accurate in terms of how your thought process goes. And he's like, then you'll end up with like 3 premiums, and those 2 4.5s will become 2 4.0s who are rotating, and it's just absolutely brilliant. So shout out to Praz for that.
Yeah, that does sound exactly right. And this is how blimmin' people probably truthfully in a lot of cases say, oh, I don't know, James Ward-Prowse bangs of them embracing game week 1. They're like, well, I had him at some point in the drafts, and actually people have made 50 drafts and covered about 250 players.
That's exactly what he says towards the end. He's like, inevitably, all the players who you've definitely had in your draft but don't
Yeah.
own game week 1 will all smash it. But obviously, the logic there is that if you've had everyone, then somebody is going to get some points, and you're not going to have all of them. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's you're right, and there definitely is that. We were talking about cycles just before we started recording about there probably is a massive flux in there, and I wonder if Twitter, if you sort of followed the kind of formation across time, people do influence each other quite a bit when you've got that unlimited transfer and everyone's on a wild card at the same time. Effectively, there'll probably be a day when big at the back's massive, and then without any injury news or any fixture changes, suddenly it is 4 rotating 4.5s and then big in up top or something. It's funny.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the analysis of that if there was a way to show that. But as you say, somebody tweets it starts to get more traction, and then all of a sudden people's teams are changing and they're tweeting, and it just, as you say, it becomes a bit of a movement, doesn't it? And that's when the template forms, isn't it? And everyone's team looks the same. So I'm kind of hoping that the fixtures are pretty mixed for most teams, because obviously if you get City, Liverpool, Spurs all having really good fixtures, there's going to be a very, very strong template, isn't there, from the start?
Yeah, I was thinking today, and I can't remember what I decided on, what I'm sort of most fearful of with the fixtures. Like, would a super bad start for one of the teams be quite good out of those three? Son, Salah, and Haaland, because that will make the decision easier. Maybe worst case would be that they're all really good, like you say.
Although actually, maybe worst case is that, especially on the captain thing, is that if for example, if City have 2 great opening fixtures and Liverpool and Spurs have 1 good fixture, 1 bad fixture, pretty much everyone's going to have Haaland, aren't they? So they can captain him.
Yeah. Interesting. And here we go off topic and probably extend the podcast beyond what I had in my head. But you said you listened to Raptor stream, but I think, am I right, came away thinking that Haaland maybe wasn't as exciting as you thought? Was that the injury record that put you off a bit?
So and it was really interesting actually. So big shout out to Raptor, and go and listen to it if you haven't. But he analyzes Haaland and he looks at his injury record, and he also looks at his stats from the Bundesliga and compares him to the likes of Kane and Salah, etc. And for a few weeks now, it's probably more like for a couple of days, but I've been thinking that unless Haaland does have unbelievable fixtures, almost certainly I'm going to go for Kane over Haaland from the start.
Wow. Okay.
Because and the England result last night may have dented that feeling a little bit. I think that's the other thing that happens before game week 1, is that anything that changes the status quo, you can add quite a lot of weight to. But obviously Kane was, by all accounts, pretty pants last night and was kind of caught diving around in the box and didn't score, and we got beat 4-0 by Hungary. But Kane is an established Premier League player. He is, he's likely to be cheaper than he was at the start of this season, I think. Maybe not by a lot, but I think he'll be cheaper than Haaland. Maybe they'll try and put them the same price just to give people a decision. But he didn't. I looked at this last night because Andy covered this in one of his videos as well, because I think Kane was in his team of the season. But Kane didn't score, or he scored 1 goal in the first 13 game weeks or 14 game weeks or something. And I think Spurs actually blanked in game week 13, 15 and 16 or something. So it wasn't quite, it wasn't quite a fair comparison to the first half of the season, the second half of the season kind of. But he still got 17, 18 goals when he'd only got 1 in the first 14 game weeks. So the Conte effect and Son and Kulusevski, and now they've got Perisic as well. Kane, there's no talk of Kane leaving Spurs this summer at the moment, and maybe there will be towards the end of the summer, but I don't expect there to be. And I just think that if Spurs fixtures are pretty decent, he's a bit of a shoe-in for me, because I think he could go big, especially if Son becomes a forward and if these sorts of things happen. I don't think there'll be those sorts of big changes, but Kane over Haaland, I think, could be quite a good way to differentiate, because there's no guarantee. Yes, Haaland could get a hat trick, could do a Ravanelli on his debut, but he could also take a bit of time to get embedded within that team. He could have his minutes managed. Whereas Kane, we know he's a 90-minute man for Spurs. We've now got the 5 subs rule. Yeah. That's going to impact teams like City quite a lot. City have played a whole season and just won the title pretty convincingly without Haaland without a striker. So they don't necessarily need him. I'm sure they're going to play, and I'm sure he'll do really well. But I just think Kane might be quite a good player, like a sensible pick to go for from the start. And obviously, if Haaland bangs game week 1, you could always make the switch across.
Interesting. Because I didn't tend to watch Raptor streams too much, but I did watch that. Had a free 10 minutes today and sort of whacked it on, and I came away thinking that he was probably more essential than I thought he was before.
Oh, really? Interesting. But because the thing that I didn't necessarily understand, and I didn't go back and listen to it again, but at the start he talks about, or after he talks about his injury record, he talks about why his stats weren't as impressive as he thought they were going to be when he started looking at it in terms of his expected goals and expected assists. But then towards the end of the video, when he was comparing him to Salah and Kane, he was saying, well, actually, Haaland comes out ahead of all of those, which I didn't really understand how those two things married up. But the big thing for me is that the Bundesliga is not the Premier League. And yes, City are a better team than Dortmund, and you'd think his service is going to be better. But again, he was embedded in that Dortmund team. They built the entire team around him. Everybody was, there to give him the ball. It's not necessarily going to be plain sailing from the start for him at City. So yes, he could get 9 goals in his first 10 games, but he could also get 2 or 3 and go off on 60 minutes a few times and everything else. Whereas we know this, the point I'm making is that Kane is a known quantity, and he's a known quantity under Conte. He's a known quantity in the Premier League when he's happy. And I think that was the other thing. I mean, obviously, if you'd started the season with Kane last season, and then you saw how they started under Nuno, the sensible decision was to take him out, because you knew that he was wanting to go to City. That didn't happen. He didn't look happy. His body language wasn't good. But as soon as Conte came in, and you felt like he was, he still took a bit of time to get up to speed when Conte came in, but he got 17 goals, 193 points, 190, whatever it was, points after such a terrible start. I mean, if Conte had been in from the start and Kane had been motivated from the start, and there was no City talk last season, he could have got 250 points easily. So
I guess you're hoping that Son is a forward then, if you go with Kane, because otherwise it's going to be surely so tempting to go with Son if he's a midfielder.
Well, this is the thing that we need to figure out with the drafts, is whether it is possible to have Kane, Son, and Salah. And if it's not, then yeah, I probably do hope that Son is a forward, because then I still think people are going to pick Son over Kane, and yet Kane's got penalties. Kane probably will be slightly cheaper than Son, and obviously Son has gone from being a midfielder where he got the extra bonus, the bonus points and the extra point for a goal and extra point for a clean sheet, and he's not going to have that anymore. So I think Son will. I don't think they'll make massive changes to the positions. I think they'll make quite big changes to prices, but we shall see. I mean, again, it's all speculation, but Kane is pretty forefront of mind at the moment.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, definitely the Nuno and the blank game weeks, actually. You're right. I think they were hit with COVID themselves, weren't they? And maybe like fixtures they were playing. I think the Burnley one was postponed and Burnley were hit. So yeah, everyone talks about his first half of the season was poor, but yeah, Nuno didn't work out, and they had 3 less fixtures.
Was the Burnley one postponed because of snow?
Maybe. I just remember
because
James Planet FPL getting stuck or whatever.
James went there, didn't he? He went up there.
Was it though that he went up there and it was absolutely peeing it down and he got stuck, or was that the rearranged game? And he's like, I can't believe I'm in Burnley on a Tuesday night and it's horrible.
I can't remember whether he went back for the rearranged game, but he definitely went for the game that got postponed. And I feel like it was because of snow, and I feel like it was like COVID and then snow. But maybe I'm completely misremembering that. But yeah, they definitely had quite a few games to rearrange, didn't they?
Yeah,
around that time.
Right, let's look at the first topic then, which is chip strategy. There's 2 charts like this on what we did with our chips. So the 6 different colours over the top are the 6 chips we could use last season. Who knows if that's going to be the same next season? Yeah, maybe they're going to go with this 2 chips in either half of the season type thing. A set, sorry, either half of the season.
I love this, by the way, Shlee. Did you see that? I'm guessing you did, that Gianni messaged you on this after you posted it. It's really cool. It's a very, very clear way of looking at it.
Yeah, thanks. It's something I started to do a bit, and then Sir Todd put out his ridiculous like 8K image that he did with all his analysis on it, which we don't go into here. Which I was like, yeah, it was obviously it's completely blown it. So I did, yeah, shout out to him and say I pinched his colours. And he was the first person to like it last night, bless him. Yeah, his mind's just incredible. And I listened to his podcast again today. It's really interesting on the analytics stuff he's doing.
He's putting out some amazing stuff, isn't he? I wonder if he'd have any interest in coming on to our pod and talking. We do a little kind of meet the analyst, meet the brain section.
Yeah, he seems like a really interesting guy because it's just one of those people where it sounds like he's got a full-time job, but yet he's doing this stuff. Or maybe the thing that has taken me, this has taken me about 3 weeks of a bit of evenings here and there where he's just like chucked something into Python and made it spit out what he did in like 4 working hours or something. But anyway, so yeah, 10 of sort of managers, I would consider that we're big followers of. So I did at one point put just Ben Crellin's full name in there and everyone else without their name, but I thought that was a little bit silly, so I just took Ben Crellin's surname off. So I think hopefully you know who everyone is.
But Ben Crellin is one of those names where you always have to say the surname. He's always Ben Crellin.
So that's who Ben is. Myself and you at the top, and then at the bottom is, and this is from Sir Talb's data, what the most of the top 150 overall rank for last season did. So this is the first half of the season. Everyone played their wild card in this part of the season. Obviously, I think you had until game week 18, and then Interest in Focal was the only person to play another chip, and that's how he got basically to world number 1. And for bench boost and triple captain, I've put the number of points they gained because that's pretty black and white to put in. And so, he got a cool 27 from that when he got Foster, was it against Arsenal? He got a penalty save, so he, I'm sure, would admit, got pretty jammy with that, but propelled him to number 1 and got loads of success on his channel on the back of that, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to just put videos up with the big, the rank 1 on there, I mean, he got so much attention during that time, didn't he? But his videos are amazing. They speak for themselves. But
yeah, that's
very,
only
very
propelled it, didn't it? Yeah, exactly.
Me and Magnus, what they were the Mavericks.
Well, yeah, again, a bit of sort of insight into my thought process when I did this, and I tweeted it out without us at the top, but I did also tweet a table of like what people had done similarly, and at one point I did have something like Nick and Magnus played their wild card in the same game week, and I was like, I can't tweet out a table that's got Nick Hughes and Magnus Carlson compared to each other. That's just insane. So I reined that in a bit.
I'd love to see Magnus's wildcard team from game week 4. I wonder if he tore up his team to get Ronaldo or Lukaku in.
So was that the main reason you did it for? Did Ronaldo join in game week 5? Wow.
He joined in game week 4. That's why that's why I did it then. So does that mean, excuse my ignorance, but does that, I think I wildcarded ahead of game week 4, didn't I? So leading up to game week 4.
Yes, that's right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That was the day we went to, was it Dorking we went to? I think that was.
Yeah, that was the Newcastle game, wasn't it? Ronaldo got a brace.
Yes, exactly. And that propelled me pretty high just from doing that as well. So.
And interestingly, well, in a couple of slides' time, we'll see that your main gain over the season was about game week 10 to 20. But I saw someone tweet out earlier, again, sort of a lessons learned thing, saying, I need to hold on to my wild card a bit later, because I think they played it in game week 4, and they blamed that on not doing so well in exactly the period you did really well. So just goes to show, transfers are a big part of it as well. But I suppose looking at that, you'd say, well, you would have done poorer around game week 10 to 20 because we had a wild card a lot closer to 10, but it didn't happen like that.
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I probably wouldn't have had to focus so much on those transfers that I made, and kind of made, that's when I brought in Gallagher, and that's when I brought in Rudiger, and just in that stint. But on the wild card, I didn't have either of those guys. My wild card wasn't actually a very good wild card. It needed transfers to fix it afterwards, but I kept Luke Shaw. I think I wildcarded to also have Jota and Torres. They didn't work out either. But yeah, I probably would have been better off saving it. But if I had saved it, would I have still gone for the likes of, those edge picks like Gallagher and Rudiger and those guys at the right time? So
yeah,
A lot of luck involved.
And if you're in a similar position to Focal, I can't remember when he bench boosted. Maybe he was, I don't know, like 50th in the world or something. Would you do something like that? I mean, obviously it worked out great because he had that bench, but I guess he wasn't expecting 27 points and a Foster penalty save and presumably 3 bonus to do something like that to almost get you to number 1, thinking that probably won't last, and you'd have a chip down on everyone else.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? It'd be interesting to chat to him about it, or to hear what he said about it, because if he bench boosted, because I've had at a much smaller stakes, much lower stakes than he was playing with at the time, but I've had times where I've been like, almost winning or at the top of kind of Let's Talk FPL's monthly league, and thought, oh, shall I bench boost now, or shall I triple captain now to kind of try and secure the win in that league, and get some little prizes or something. But
yeah,
and I think I did that a couple of years ago. I think I triple captained Kane or Mane, and they got nothing, and I ended up not winning the league, and then luckily managed to somehow secure manager of the month a couple of months later, which was great. But it'd be interesting to know whether Focal did that in order to really, really jump up, or whether he thought that actually this is my bench is looking really good this week and I'm going to go for it.
Yeah. I think I would probably do either of those scenarios. I think being number 1, even around game week 11, when okay, doubles are coming and you might have a disadvantage, would be pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
But like you say, yeah, if the bench is strong, you can get it out of the way, and normally it would be around doubles and people would pair it with wildcard too. But again, as I'll come to later, a lesson learned. I think I was too emotional on my second wildcard, and you've really got to play it near a bench boost if you value the bench boost chip. And I think if doubles are around next season and COVID's maybe a thing, hopefully not, but there is a lot of value there, as we'll see on the next slide. I mean, I think we're happy with ours getting, was it 16 and 17? But I mean, I think Magnus got 40 plus points from his bench boost.
Yeah,
incredible. So let's have a look, because the second half of the season is much more interesting. So interestingly, I mean, the thing I'd like to look at first about this is that the OR 150 at the bottom, that's when people in general played their chips to get a rank of 150. And obviously chip timing is not the only reason they were there, but they were high up, and they did their 5 chips at a time when no one else did of the 12 managers above them, which is pretty mad.
so hang on, that overall rank 150, they all played their chips on
No,
that time.
that was the most popular. That was the most
Okay.
popular combination.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So it's not all of them did that, but
because that would be pretty
yeah,
decisive,
indicative of how to play your chips. Yeah.
Exactly. Just do that again. That's interesting.
I do sometimes think this is a bit like one of those, that mastermind game you might have played growing up. You had to put the bloody pegs in the holes in the right color order. Yeah. It's a bit like this. So you see that actually Mark was very close to 4 of the chips being played. I mean, obviously Mark, bless him, got the worst rank of all of us on here, but he then went with his pretty maverick free hit 2 and 34 along with Az, and that obviously didn't work out. But had he done 37 like a lot of people, he would have done that exact sort of combo that seemed to would do well for the top 150.
But it is interesting, that, isn't it? Because you look at the majority of managers on here did the same thing we did, which was obviously triple captain Salah. I would imagine, I'm guessing they all triple captain Salah in 28, and that paid off brilliantly. But obviously I was listening to Andy a lot around then, and he was obviously saying that he wasn't going to triple captain because he wanted to wildcard in 26.
Right.
Sorry, I said 28. Yeah, the 28 is the number of points it got us, isn't it? But
yeah,
in 26, triple captain Salah. But it's strange then that, because I would have thought, because the triple captain on Salah was so big in 26, I'm surprised that the majority of the overall rank 150
true
played the second wildcard in 26 instead. But I think maybe it all came out in the wash eventually. But
yeah, and sorry, what I said a minute ago was wrong. Andy actually did play those last 5 chips at the same time. I've just matched up the colours there as the OR 150, and I haven't got the table sort of highlighting what people did or didn't do uniquely, but Andy was the only person I think to not do something unique. So he played his chips at the same time as at least one other person. So in a way, he was very template with when he played them. He didn't go out on a limb and do something a bit wacky like you and I 23, 24 wild card, or as a Mark doing 34 free hit 2. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed.
But yeah, look at some of the bench boost points. Like, yeah, we both did it 33. I think was it Veghorst and who else was mostly responsible for that? I seem to think there was like 2 blanks and 2 returns with that.
Yeah, it was Veghorst and who's the Southampton striker on loan from Chelsea.
Oh, did he come in on that game? I know who you mean, but I
He
can't
came
think
in
of his
from
name.
he was in my bench boost. I've totally forgotten his name.
But he returned that week. Brilliant.
No. Sorry, he didn't return. No. He was the reason why I.
Oh, okay.
He was the reason why I bench boosted then.
Right. Okay.
Bro,
But yeah,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, 46 points for Magnus though.
I know.
Bench boosts 36. I mean, Fabio did it the same weekend only, or that's a great score, 30, but that's a lot lower. I think he had like Magnus Mikolenko. That's the only name I can remember, but I think he got like 15 points or something crazy. So I wonder if there's something in that, because 36 was a big-ish double, wasn't it? It wasn't as big as 37, which Magnus actually didn't do anything in. So I just think this is quite amazing that all these people, obviously very engaged. I mean, and Ben Credden, certainly, I put him in as the kind of guru of the chips, have interpreted all of this so differently and done things in such different orders. And I must admit, as I thought was quite pioneering at the time when he did what he's done there, and sort of using the free hit really close to a wild card, and you sort of almost catapult yourself out of that. I didn't even think of doing it like that. I mean, I played the wild card by then anyway, but I just think this shows there's so many ways to do that. And I don't know if you saw, but on Twitter, Ben Crellin earlier, he already knows the schedule for next season. Is talking about 28 being a blank next season, quite a big one, and 29 perhaps being quite a big double. So
he already knows the schedule for next season.
Yeah, doesn't know the fixtures, but he knows where the sort of midweek blanks are and stuff.
Right. Yeah, fair enough.
So there's going to be some carnage around that same 28-29 period next year.
Presumably we're not going to have a second free hit unless they give people a second free hit to deal with the World Cup, and people are allowed to keep it again.
Yeah, true.
Which could be interesting.
I mean, looking at this,
World Cups can be such a huge asterisk, isn't it, on the season?
Yeah, it's going to be tricky, isn't it? I mean, people like Haaland Norway not participating, is that going to be a big thing? It's tricky, isn't it?
Salah not participating. It surely means that everyone's going to have Salah first game week after the World Cup. You would think.
Yeah.
Maybe everyone will have him anyway, but you'd have to have Salah, I think, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And yeah, as you say, maybe Haaland as well.
And does this make you? I doubt it, because your wild card went very well, but regret not doing something different with that? I mean, that you did catch it was the De Bruyne and City fixture string that you got on top of with that, and it really worked out for you, didn't it?
It did, but I think again I got really lucky with it. I think it probably wasn't the right time to wildcard. I almost wildcarded. It goes to kind of some of the things we're talking about, lessons learned later on. But I was, I think I was in the top 1K in the game weeks leading up to that, and then I slipped out to like 3K and then out to 9K, and then I saw this opportunity to wildcard. But I think the opportunity was that everyone thought Villa were going to get doubles. I brought in a couple of Villa players. I think one of them was Watkins. Obviously, that didn't work out at all. But I also just happened to see that City had this great run of kind of 4 or 5 fixtures, and it didn't feel like many people were on them. I think De Bruyne hadn't done a huge amount at that point. He may even have been kind of level with Foden in terms of what Foden was doing. So that seemed like an opportunity. And then the other big thing was, I think I listened to the FPL Wire around that time, and they were talking about how well Robertson was doing and how everyone was kind of sleeping on Robertson because Trent was doing okay, and Robertson was just quietly racking up these assists and getting bonus, etc. And so I thought, right, I'm going to get Jota out of this team, and I'm going to go for Trent and Robertson and Salah, and also had De Bruyne, and it went really, really, really well for me. But actually, on reflection, it probably wasn't the right time to do it. And if you think the -16 that I took in game week 29 was almost required because of that wildcard. And actually, a really good lesson actually from that is that if you do wildcard at the wrong time, you can get lucky like me. But I was I probably spent the points that I earned from the De Bruynes and the Laportes and the Robertsons on transfers in trying to build my team for the double game weeks and the best time to triple captain and just different things that the blank in 30. I had to build in a very different way to that, and I spent a lot of points on transfers around that time when I'd actually been really, really frugal up till then in the season. So I guess I think I was just lucky that it went as well as it did, and then I probably balanced it out with the transfers that I made afterwards.
Yeah.
But you, in terms of when you wildcarded, are you, because you've kind of said a few times that you almost wildcarded because mine was going well, but do you regret playing the wildcard when you did now in 24?
Yeah, definitely think that was an emotional one. But I can also, I think, see myself falling into that trap again. I was having, and this is, you'll see later, I haven't added that to the list. It's one thing I would love to say I could do, but I think that is so difficult when you're having a really crappy time. And, especially if someone, obviously we were just starting it around then, we chat about FPL quite a bit, but obviously we were then sort of joined at the hip a little bit starting this, and then seeing you do so great with that, it was, I think, partly that, and I think City still had the good fixtures, and I remember analysing it, and I think I was like 8 points up on what I would have done, because that week actually Jota did really well in 24, and I didn't captain, and I would have done had I not wildcarded, so I wouldn't have been that far down had I just kept with my team. So there was a lot of emotion around that, and I basically played the season with almost no wild cards because the first one didn't go great, I didn't think, and this one I think was kind of wasted. I mean, at the time there was still some doubles to capitalise on, like Man U. I remember you saying my goalkeeper rotation was great because I was able to have Ramsdale and De Gea, but neither of those were season beaters. But there were some doubles announced around then you could get on. So I think I was maybe a bit overexcited as well about, wow, these doubles are coming in. But then 2 weeks later, it was almost 50% more doubles, and we then saw how crazy towards 36 and 37 went. So I think I just went too early with it.
I think that is a huge lesson for both of us, though, in terms of the wild card, because every week you could wild card and you're going to pick the best team for that week that you think, and you're looking at the fixtures moving forward. But I know that I wild carded before we knew that the information on the doubles was coming, but I went before I had any of that information.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like the kind of macrocosm of going early on a transfer when, in straight after almost mid game week going on a transfer for the next game week, I kind of wildcarded before I got any of that information about those doubles. And it went okay for me, but I could have maybe brought in Robertson on a transfer if I really wanted Robertson or whatever. I'm obviously just picking the one move that went well, or maybe I would have brought in Watkins thinking Villa had doubles and that wouldn't have gone so well. But we both went before we had the full picture, didn't we? I think. But if we hadn't, we may have ended up wildcarding in doing exactly what Andy and Mark and the overall 150 did, and for better or worse. Maybe I wouldn't have triple captained Salah in 26, which I would have massively regretted, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm glad that something like that did go right. It was so classic on paper, and obviously a lot of people on this chart did that, but that's one of those where I'm glad I just didn't have the stress of doing something unusual around then, and maybe lucky that it paid off. But
it was great. It was, as you say, it's sometimes nice in this it's very nice in this when you plan for something happening and it actually happens. It kind of feels rare, but maybe it shouldn't feel as rare as it does.
Yeah. Vocal getting 3 points on his triple captain 36. I think that was Salah.
Was it Salah?
Was that when he had a double, but not a great double?
When he played Newcastle, he was benched against Newcastle, and then was he benched in one of those in the 36 fixtures, and no one expected it.
Yeah, maybe.
I think everyone thought, well, he was benched against Newcastle, so he's already had his rest, and then he didn't, and then he missed one. I can't remember whether it was the next fixture or the one after that, but that's brutal, isn't it? When you see what other people are getting.
Yeah, Magnus has got like 46 of his bench boost from probably non-premium players, and only gaining 3. It's pretty mad. Anyway, should we move on?
Indeed, yep.
And then the only thing then I did with this, which I again was going to do in a bit more detail, was take these 12 managers, average their ranks over the season, overall rank, which is the grey line. So that's the average of 12 managers labelled. And then I plotted you, me, and Fabio what our OR graphs look like as well. And this shows the sort of gains and the losses at different parts of the season I was discussing. From game week 8, your rank just increases hugely compared to all of us. And sort of by game week 19, inside the top 1k, miles ahead of the average of the 12 of us, miles ahead of Fabio and myself. And at that point, actually, me, Fabio, and the average are about similar. And then obviously you just seem to kind of comparatively flatline then, and the likes of Fabio caught you up quite spectacularly.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you can see, do you remember I just spoke about the wild card, and see in game week 19, I'm in the top 1k, and then I just slip out quite quickly out to about 10k. And that's when I wild carded.
Okay, yeah, that was part of it. You thought, this is slipping away, I need to consolidate / boost yourself back up again.
Yeah, and it worked really well. I boosted myself back up to the top, to around the 1k.
Yeah.
So it definitely worked. But as you say, I think the big thing for me at the end of the season was just, I think, really was messing up the, I've spoken about this a couple of times now, but obviously captain Salah 35 benched and had Son, but didn't captain, and then 36. The double didn't go kind of as well as it could have done. Again, that's when De Bruyne went absolutely bananas. So that was another reason for kind of it slipping out. And then 37 was, I got some things right on the free hit, but I didn't have Richarlison. I didn't have Richarlison captain. I went for Danny. When you look back on these decisions, I went for Danny Ings. I didn't captain him, but I've had him in my team instead of having Richarlison. It just looks like absolute madness now.
I know. My captain Danny Ings, and Ali McMillan rightly gave me a lot of stick.
Well, I captained Son, single game week player, didn't I? So
yeah.
But yeah, I think if I'd done better on the free hit at 37, I think I still could have got within the top 1k. But I think De Bruyne really killed me in 36, and then 37 didn't go well. But yeah, you can see that. I mean, look at Fabio. It's just because there was a time I remember they were talking about him on Black Box at one point, and he was, it probably was around the time he was kind of over 100k. But from then on, he's so consistent. He has a little jump back up again, but generally it's that line trending down, isn't it, to another amazing finish.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about Fabio's graph that's quite interesting. I mean, yours bounces a lot between like 14 and 19, which I seem to remember was when little postponements were happening, COVID and stuff. And so maybe for you that was quite hard to to get a foothold. You're like, right, one good week, one crappy week. But
Yes.
Fabio just goes on this complete sprint of, I think you remember he got Pope and he got his 19 points. I think he's on the right end of Fernandez in 22.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of when his great run finishes. But it looks like he got like 10 green arrows in a row there. The graph just goes down and down and down.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the other thing that's interesting is at the end, you guys really sort of parted your ways at 35. And I think he probably got all the captains right, whereas you didn't. And you almost just reflect off each other and both go from 1k, but you go up to 3k and he goes down to 200.
I mean, whenever I'm compared to Fabio, whether it's good or bad, it's I'll take it. But yeah, it is right. It's correct. We are absolutely mirroring at the end there of 35, aren't we? So
exactly.
He stole my rightful rank at the end of the season. That's basically what happened.
Yeah. And the thing I thought was interesting about mine was just the fact I wildcard in 24, and it just drifted from sort of 26 to 30. I didn't seem to be making much ground, but just small red arrows. I think I got like 5 out of 6 or something red arrows pretty close after wildcard, and I just couldn't really claw it back. And a bit of a surge at the end, but it just was a bit damp squib around them. So it was pretty frustrating. Obviously, Son was massive to do with that.
Yeah.
But before that, actually looking at this, it's not too bad. I follow the sort of average quite well, and ahead of Fabio for quite a bit of that, and then just didn't. Sort of a solid first half, but then I think that again comes down to the risk taking and maybe just so not used to such bold decisions needed around big doubles and blanks and throwing chips around. I don't think that's my natural game, so I think I massively struggled in that sort of last third.
Be interesting to remember what kind of game week 17 and 18 were, because if you look, all of our lines, you, me, and Fabio all look very similar around that time. Yeah, and then Fabio's line carries on down from 19, whereas yours kind of comes back up again. But I'm guessing, 19 must have been when Salah missed that penalty, I think, mustn't it?
I think that's probably 20 because yours goes up quite a bit. I think 19 looks like you had a good week. 20,
oh, okay.
19
is a good week. 20 is a bad week. Right. But I guess so it's probably quite likely that Fabio didn't captain Salah then against Leicester.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine goes up a little bit in 20, so I think you and I were both on the wrong end of it, weren't we? I think that must be the week. But yeah, you're right. Fabio was doing something else.
Yeah.
Mm.
But that made sense because the week before, Liverpool had a COVID postponement, didn't they? And so maybe that's when he thought, because Salah was going to go to AFCON shortly after that. So some people were coming off him.
Right. Well, we free hit in 19, I think. Yeah. So that would have been, I think we got on Spurs.
Yeah, but it allowed us to keep all those Liverpool players, didn't it?
Yes, true. Albeit, yeah, he didn't really do it on going into AFCON, did he, Salah? He missed that penalty. Did he get one return maybe? But I think we'd held on to him 3 or 4 weeks too long in hindsight at that point.
Yeah. Indeed. But this is the thing, we talk about kind of lessons learned. I mean,
yeah, I don't think you can put something like that down.
But Salah was so unbelievably brilliant and consistent. And when he was doing what he did to Man City and when he did what he did to United, I was just like, we're watching the best player in the world at the moment. The goal he scored against City in particular, when you think they're the best defense in the league, and he just turned them inside out and then scored with his weaker foot. Like, he was the best player in the world at that time. And so it's just, I thought, I'm keeping this guy whatever happens, because he is going to keep doing it. It's like watching Messi kind of in his prime at the moment. And but yeah, I think it's just a lot of other people just thought, well, AFCON's coming up and maybe he's tired and whatever else. But yeah, that felt like a big turning point for me in my season.
I'm just looking at how much space on the page as well. Well, it's only yours and Fabio's season occupies. Like, you did have real roller coasters of a season, mostly for the good, but there was a lot of big greens and big reds thrown in there.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because I wonder whether there must be loads of people at the start of the season who just use all their chips right at the start, because I had a pretty good start. I got over 100 points in game week 1. And yet my rank is still having to come down from over 100k. So
sure, but then that goes back to the thing we said last week. If you average a million game week rank each week, you probably will win FPL. So that game week 1 OR is your GR, isn't it? That's how well you did in that week. So yeah, exactly. But you're right.
Exactly.
Did you get over 100 points? Wow, decent.
Yeah, because I had Salah, but I had Fernandes. Salah captain, but Fernandes against Leeds, and
yeah, sure. So did I, but I didn't think I got. Is that right? Yeah, did you start the best on that? Yeah, you were well ahead of all of us. Best ranked by quite a bit. Yeah, nice.
This is a brilliant way of looking at the season, though, Shlee, because it's all there, and you've just got to remember the game weeks. But it's a fantastic way of looking at your whole season in a review, isn't it?
Yeah, that's good. I think a lot of people might be looking at this and thinking, why have you got good rank towards the bottom? That might be upsetting a few people, but
yeah, I did wonder that, but I quite like it, actually.
Okay,
quite like it. Was there a reason for doing that and not having it at the top?
I'm trying to think what. Again, I mentioned him second time. Our friend Ali McMillan, when him and I used to battle it out on seasons, and I don't know where you were, but I didn't send him birthday cards with statistics in, but I did used to, at the end of each season, probably send him this on SMS back in the day of what we were up to. And maybe I had it the other way round, but I think I might have seen Ben Crellin do it this way, and maybe subconsciously I've done it like that. I don't know why.
I think you're supposed to call him Ben now. He doesn't like. He's the artist formerly known as Crellin.
Right. We will move on to 3 Twitter bits I saw in the last week. Again, that will just spark a bit of conversation. This stuff that Andrew Gow produces is fantastic. So he has looked at players in the 21-22 season that got more than 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 and 15 points, and the percentage of time that they did that, and sort of ranked them. So Salah was the most explosive and consistent player in the 15 plus points club. He did that 14% of the season. And at the other end of the spectrum, Robbo was sort of Mr. Consistent. He got more than 5 points in 72% of weeks. So it's obviously a bit of a who's who of what the season had. I mean, your mate Gallagher's on there in the 15 plus and table as well. Like so Jorginho. So there's a few pretty random ones in there. Mings, blimey. But James as well really catches my eye there. You know, talk about his ones and twos or more than 15s. He was super explosive, but hard to predict. And I think I'm just going to keep this up my sleeve a little bit when looking for, you know, there's fixture swings. I don't know. Yeah, you're looking for a Leicester. This suggests that you would go for Maddison because, as far as I can see quickly, he's the only one. Actually, Vardy's in there on the 12 points plus, but you know, it's just a good reference point, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, and as you say, if you see that Leicester have got a good run of fixtures, 5 or 6 fixtures, and you think, right, I want 1 or 2 Leicester, who am I going to get? And I think this suggests you would have to have Maddison.
Yeah, and it's so easy, I think, in that moment to think, oh, you know, maybe Perez is going to suddenly do something, or Tielemans, and you know, Tielemans had a bit of a spell last season, but it's quite easy to forget what has happened and what can happen. And you know, I think there is something definitely in players that are capable of getting those points. And I'm sure Perez has got 15 point before, but he might have only got 1 in his career. Whereas Maddison, you can see here, has got whatever 9% of 38 is, and you can quite easily forget that. But this, I think, is quite a handy, you know, recent history what people have done. Look up.
Amazing how different the list of 15 plus points is from the 12 plus points list. You would think that they would be very similar, but it shows that people, you know, lots of players are able to get around the 12 point mark, but getting 15 points is a bit of a special feat.
Yeah, so someone that, particularly, I guess, a person that appears on one list but not another.
Yeah, there's quite a big divergence between the 12 plus list and the 15 plus list. Like there aren't many people who appear on the 15 and also on the 12, which is strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite strange.
But it will just be because those percentages, you know, those people on that 15 plus list, they have been hugely explosive in a few games. Like you look at those players, so like Gallagher, Maddison, Sterling. They got those 15 plus point hauls a couple of times, like maybe 2 or 3 times, but they didn't get 12 points very often.
Yeah.
Or not as often as the guys who are on that list. So
Actually, it looks like Gallagher only appears on this whole table once, and that's in the 15 plus, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, because, I mean, but that's the thing, and that's why my rank jumped or dropped or jumped, you know, so well during that period, because I managed to hit 2 of Gallagher's big hauls.
Yeah,
but I also had him for a few 2s and 3s and 1s.
Yeah, as in when it was bouncing about quite a bit, it was probably down to Gallagher a lot, wasn't it? Yeah, probably exactly right.
But I had Gallagher and James around that time, and I managed to hit a few of James's big hauls as well. So that's why my rank flew up so much.
Yeah,
because they were differentials too.
I was just looking at the 5 and 6 pluses. Look how sort of templatey, big teamy, boring they are. Loads of Liverpool and City assets in there.
And
a
all
lot of defenders, or goalkeepers. Just shows that they can be the real backbone of the team.
But it also just shows how consistent Son is as well, doesn't it? Like Son and Salah. Like I'm there at the start of the pod talking about Kane. Kane isn't really on there very much. He's on the 10, although he is on the 10 plus points list 24% of the time. That's pretty strong, isn't it? And he's on the 12 points list. But Son and Salah are, I mean, obviously it makes sense. They were the highest point scorers, but they had very, very good seasons in there. Although Salah was very, very poor in the latter part of the season. Apart from his massive Game Week 26 score, he didn't have a huge amount to crow about after he got back from AFCON, did he?
Yep, true.
So maybe that is the lesson on Salah, is that if you start to think he's playing too many games, but maybe he'll have the opposite season this season because he's not going to the World Cup.
Yeah, could do. Yeah, I do wonder if and you were talking about XG on last week's episode, if someone like Fabio is plotting like a moving average of XG and could see earlier than anyone else that Salah's XG was dropping. I don't think it was Salah, but I'm sure I saw someone graphing that where you could almost see just a little bit of a dip, and that probably became even before the tiredness was a thing. Maybe Klopp switched his position a bit, or maybe it was just fixture difficulty. But that little thread of tweets that we were discussing before we came on of Fabio discussing his season, I think through FF Scout they did it. It's really interesting, and it is in a way a few people commented sort of quite obvious stuff, but I think there's a few little things in there where he says something, but actually when you read it and think actually what is required to do that, like I think he mentioned, that form is a temporary thing, but you need to look at long-term trends. I think he's almost maybe meaning that he's got a database of this sort of stuff and can tell when Salah is maybe on a bit of a dip because he knows his level he should be at. And maybe looking at XG's like, right, it looks like he's about to do a little bit of a dip here. Time to get rid.
Yeah, interesting. And then especially with the fact that they had the COVID postponement, Fabio didn't free hit that week, and then he's going to AFCON after a couple of fixtures, and that's why that Leicester fixture was so huge though, because so many people, even great managers, had gone away from Salah that week. I think his EO was at like 80%, whereas for every week before that, it had been like 180, 190. But that's why that was so huge when he missed that penalty, because if he'd scored the penalty and then gone on to get more points, it would have been massive for both. Well, for anyone who captained him, right? So
yeah,
those sorts of moments in a season, and you would generally bet your house on Salah, wouldn't you? So
yeah. Right, next one for a bit of a Twitter review is Sir Todd did this crazy thing on how important initial your initial team is and your wildcard teams are in terms of the percentage of points you get. So this suggests that over a season, 60% of the points you gain are from players that you have in your initial team and in your 2 wildcard teams. And I think he name dropped like 4 managers or something. I think Fabio's like 61%. So I think this is fairly typical of elite managers. And we stress out about free hits and transfers, but free hits only 7% of the points you get in a season, and transfers are only 34, so less important than your wild cards.
amazing.
It's
And
pretty
this
mad,
is
isn't it?
this is just on average, though, right?
Yeah, but I don't think it's average over the 9 million players. I think it must be some sort of elite group. Does he say at the top? Oh, sorry, this is Fabio. This is Fabio's season.
Right. Okay.
So casual.
Yeah, exactly. Thing is, that is interesting though, isn't it? Because when you only get 1 free transfer a week and Fabio doesn't take a huge amount of hits, to get 34% of your points from your transfers is still a big percentage.
Yeah.
And the thing is, again, for somebody like Fabio, it'd be interesting to see this averaged out across, the top overall rank 150 or something. But he's pretty good at making strong transfers that then he doesn't need to rectify a couple of weeks later. Because obviously,
true.
If he was making a transfer and then taking that player out 2 weeks later because, and again, maybe that does happen to Fabio, somebody gets injured, he has a bit of bad luck on that, but then that transfer's points percentage is going to drop. Whereas on your wild card, you're getting those players in and keeping them for a long time, aren't you, generally?
Yeah. And I mean, he's wildcards in 8 and 27, so I suppose that is pretty typical. But if you were to wildcard early, maybe like yourself, I think your wildcard percentage might be even higher. Should be carrying those players for longer. So
well, no, I don't know. I think I was just going to say I think it'd be lower because you think I said that I made mistakes on that game week 4 wild card. Brought in Torres, who ended up getting transferred to Barcelona, getting dropped and transferred out. Brought in Jota, who I ended up getting rid of. So I almost made correcting transfers quite quickly after that wild card.
Yeah.
So I would expect to see my transfers percentage be higher than my wildcard percentage, especially when you think the players I brought in like Gallagher, Rudiger, Reece James, they're not players that I had on my wildcard. So I think my wildcard percentage would be much lower than Fabio's.
Interesting. Yeah. In which case the sort of bleed of the green colour into your team would be quite dramatic. Yeah, as you sort of took hits to rectify that. I think he's going to add this to the season review stuff. So before the game does it, we could get it if we wanted, but more, I think, one for next season to see. It'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, do you think he is going to add it before this season updates? Did you say? Or
I got the impression so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see mine for this season and then be able to compare it to next.
Yeah. Interesting.
Very, very cool. He's doing some amazing stuff though, isn't he?
Yeah. Lastly was FF Scout Niels looking at, of the previous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 strikers that have come up from the Championship scoring 25 or more goals, how they fared in the season following that in the Premier League.
Yeah.
So we've got some big names on here: Tony, Mitrovic, Watkins, Abraham. So decent players. And I suppose one way of looking at it, everyone scored more than 10 goals apart from Mitrovic and Adam Armstrong. But another way of looking at it is that their drop from their 25 goals is considerable. Ollie Watkins and Abraham with 14 and 15 is the best, but I don't know, the average is probably about 10 goals, which maybe isn't too bad. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, the promoted teams and again, obviously their strikers, for me, it's very fixture dependent. If they have a terrible start, I won't even be considering them. I don't think. I'd probably rather have a 4.5 striker and improve and have a better midfielder or something like that. So if Mitrovic has got decent fixtures and he looks fit and he's getting a few goals in pre-season, I just think because he broke that record and he is that year older and he is in his prime and he has got a manager who you suspect fully believes in him and plays much more attacking football than they've previously played. I think he's worth the risk if he's 6.5 and if they've got decent fixtures. But if not, again, I think I'll probably avoid from the start.
But good fixtures in 7 or even 7.5. Do you think 6.5 is a bit of a hard line?
No, I just think that do you think he will be more than 6.5 then?
Not sure, but I just quite interesting because in my head 6.5 sounds like newly promoted sort of classic, but maybe it'll be a bit more. But if he's got 45 goals and a good fixture list, I'm not sure I'd be put off by 7 or even 7.5.
No, true, but then I was criticizing or kind of marveling at people who are making drafts without players or whatever. But when I did try and do that myself, I had a Mitrovic in there at 6.5, and it was still very, very difficult to make, to be able to have a Son and a Salah and a decent defense. So if he's more than 6.5, I'm going to really struggle because in those drafts I had 2 4.5 mids and I think a 4.5 million striker as well, or something like that. So every 0.5 will count.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And let's move on to the last bit, which was I've got 4, you've got 5, a list of things we're going to try and do differently next season. We've kind of approached this in 2 different ways, but I think it's quite interesting.
I haven't seen your list. I'm trying to read it at the same time. But do you want to talk us through these?
Yeah. So the 4 I've noted down here is 1, improve captaincy. In short, I put here, for example, by using the examples where it went wrong in 21-22, I think I'm a very, what did I do before? I need to visually see it and I need to learn from it. So what I'm going to try and do, certainly before the season starts, is I've sort of done this for half the season, and then the FPL the Fancy Nutmeg site went down. I did tweet him to ask him when it was back up because they had a really nice visual of my captain points, your captain points, which I could superimpose, and then I think it was the top 10K's average captain points. And basically, whenever I had a week where I had a poor captain, and you and the top 10K had a much better captain, basically you had returns and I didn't, I looked into that week and looked a bit more at what I did and what I did wrong. In hindsight, maybe it was a good captain. I was on the end of bad luck and you guys were on the end of a good luck. But I think there's something in that, and a couple of things I did see without noting this down is that I maybe didn't trust my my ticker enough, and I was going for maybe a greyish fixture when there was another alternative blue fixture. I don't know, I need to look into it a bit more, but I think there was a couple there. And this is only, maybe 20% of captain. So I think often, I put here, high EO doesn't always mean the best captain. I think that is true probably 80% of the time. But I think those 20% where you need to go against the grain, and again, coming back to my poor risk taking and natural kind of tendency to go safe, I think I need to get better at what I do when I have to take risks.
But you could almost, I mean, because I think that plays in nicely to, and I agree with all of that. I think that plays in nicely to my first lesson is don't be fearful. And if you're to look at your ticker, which is kind of proprietary to you, and you believe in it, and you spend time maintaining it, and the data is solid, and it plays into the color of those fixtures, then you could almost commit to captaining the player, captaining a player in a game with the best fixture, or with the best fixture on your ticker each week. And you don't have to fully commit to that, because we don't have to be kind of as rigid as that. But as you say, if you see somebody who's high EO and has a great fixture, you can kind of think, well, is there a better alternative here? And maybe you would find maybe you'd find Havertz against Norwich or whatever, and then that wouldn't go so well. But yeah, I think if your data was correct, that Man United fixture for Liverpool should have looked pretty blue at that time, because Liverpool were on fire and Man United were terrible. So,
well, that's an example of where I won't probably have the time to go into the detail. And yeah, when it went right, just to check that I did that, with good information and that sort of thing. So I think that might be quite tricky. But yeah, I definitely think improving the ones that go wrong. Maybe look at I don't know, capacity hit rate or something. So that's the first one.
Yeah.
And these are kind of in priority order. So I think that's the biggest one for me. Secondly, improve the use of the wildcard chips. Get players with more upside. Be less boring. I.e., I didn't go with James and Chilwell, and I went with Aspi in game week 8, and play it near with a bench boost. As I say, I think I was quite emotional playing that one. If I think bench boost is going to be as powerful as it was this season potentially.
Yeah.
I don't think any of that is that surprising. It's very easy to say I'll be better at picking wildcard picks, but I think as well with that Sertolp data, that how important the wildcard is. That sounds stupid, but obviously life gets in the way sometimes. But that wildcard week is so key. You've got to pick when to do it correctly. Fixture swings are obviously quite useful. People like Late Riser are so good at picking those 3 fringe players that go into a wild card. He got on Doherty really early and the bandwagon. So I think spending a bit of time trying to figure out those ones, and if Aït-Nouri or Harrison are anywhere near the team, then I know I've not learned anything.
Yeah, because we were talking about that, weren't we, the other week, that I was asking you about some of those picks. But I think absolutely agree with upside, because if you think about that game week 8 and kind of Azpilicueta, the chance that James or Chilwell gets injured or is benched, they're benched in the next game or the game after that or whatever, and Azpilicueta's there with his steady 6 points and maybe a bonus for 7 or something like that. But the chance that Azpilicueta gets a 21 pointer, and obviously I'm drilling down I'm focusing on Azpilicueta versus James and Chilwell, but if you go for those solid picks all the time, there is less upside, isn't there? And so, it would have been absolutely massive to go for James and Chilwell in game week 8. And there was risk with that, because we didn't know whether they were going to come back from injury, whether they were going to stay in the team, whether they were going to be rotated. But anybody who went for James and Chilwell on a game week 8 wildcard will have flown up the ranks, weren't they?
Yeah. One counter to that, though, is I do wonder if last season we were spoilt by a lot of explosive hauls. I've not seen any data on this, but I just got the feeling that there was a lot of really swingy decisions, and it was almost a really fun season because there were so many 20-pointers, and maybe that was a double game week thing as well. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you sort of think maybe 4 or 5 seasons ago, maybe not the Leicester season, that springs to mind as a bit of a proof against this, but good players often were more 5 to 10 points a week rather than us being blessed with Son 15 pluses and James 15 pluses.
Yeah, I definitely think the double game weeks will have had a massive impact on that. But it is strange. There does seem to be this thing emerging, and it was kind of borne out by what Raptor was saying about Haaland, is that Haaland is this physical marvel. And so in a game where he's on form and he's fit and well, he destroys people. Like, he absolutely destroys them. But he's so finely tuned that he gets injured next week. It's exactly the same thing with Reece James. We saw it. What was the game where in the first game he absolutely smashed it, and then the second game he went off injured after 62 minutes or whatever, but he'd already got 2 goals and an assist or something.
Newcastle, I think, game week 28 for you. Yeah, you
Yeah,
captained him.
but then he's so finely tuned. Same with like Tariq Lamptey. So I don't know whether there's this thing that's starting to happen where, certainly more than the players we used to enjoy watching in the 90s. These players are so finely tuned. They're so, they're in the gym all the time. They're, absolute beasts. And then, so they can smash it one week and then the next week they're out injured, or they have to play left, they have to play right centre back because they can't get up and down the wing. So maybe players are just more explosive now than they used to be. And obviously the wing backs, and the rise of the wing back means that a player, if he gets a clean sheet and he gets a goal, he is going to get into the high teens, isn't he? Whereas in the past, you'd have Jose Bosingwa at right back, and
Jamie Carragher getting a solid 7 and 6.
Exactly, he gets a nosebleed and falls into the corner flag when he goes up front. So I don't know. Maybe there's something in that, or maybe I'm just making stuff up to make it fit.
No, I think there is something in that for sure. And you mentioned the James 18 pointer. I think it's almost one of those mad things where if you gave me the decision of 2 6-pointers from Aspi, but an 18 and a 0 from James, I think almost my immediate head would say, well, Aspi's the better choice then, because I want that consistency. But obviously 12 is far less than 18. But do you know what I mean?
I was just going to say, if you offered me 18 points or 12, surely I'd just take 12. I'm like, I'm not sure your logic's sound there.
But that explosiveness is important because they are that explosive, and I think again that comes back to my thinking that an explosive haul is about 12, 15 maybe, but I think now that has changed a bit, and the James and Chilwells are able to get 15 plus. So I've got to try and get those.
Though. It will be really interesting this season coming if there aren't as many postponements and there aren't as many doubles. I don't think I'm going to do as well this season because I think, although having said that, I think we discussed this last pod. I actually was doing better at the start of the season when there were less postponements, just because I was not taking as many hits as I used to take. But it will be a very, very different season this season if there aren't as many double game weeks.
Yeah, true. My number 3 is a bit of a weird one. Remember that there are losses as well as gains, and this is a bit of a protect yourself against the losses. Basically, getting on Son too late. Don't ignore a well-owned asset performing well for too long, especially if they're a big hitter. And this, blimey, I've got this on, and I will try and hopefully find time to tweet out quite a long sort of thread of my kind of ways I play FPL, because there's a few things there that people might find interesting. But one of them for sure is exactly this, and Yaya Toure is probably mentioned on it because I've been maintaining the list for that long. Even if he's getting one off his bum or getting a fluky penalty or scoring a free kick in the top corner that you think can't carry on, there is definitely a limit of how long that can go on before you just have to join the club. And Mark going against Son and going against Salah, what was it, 34, he just made that decision and said, I've made my bed, I'm sleeping in it. I don't think I could ever say that, and again, maybe the risk taker there is the problem, but I don't think I could ever say I'm just not getting that player. It just stinks a little bit of a kind of, if you're an Arsenal fan, you're not going to pick a Spurs player or something. I don't think you can ever make your bed like that.
But when I was reading through and hearing you talk about it, I was thinking exactly of Mark Sutherns and the fact that he ignored Son, which hurt him. And I think he allowed Az to talk him into going from Son to Kane, I think, didn't he?
Oh, did he?
And didn't get Son back. But he did then ignore Salah after 34. And he said, look, I've made my bed now. But I think that the big difference between those two things is the asset performing well, because Salah wasn't necessarily performing well, but he was hugely owned. And we thought at any point he's going to hit a massive haul. And we discussed last week, Jamie Pickett doesn't win FPL if Salah gets a haul at any point in the last 5 game weeks. He just doesn't do it. So, and again, if somebody had said to you, right, will Salah get a 10+ point haul in the last 5 game weeks? Again, if you were a betting man, you'd definitely put money on that happening, and it didn't. So I think the big 3 is absolutely right, but the asset performing well is key to that. Don't be afraid of a high EO player who you don't believe is performing well. But yeah, if you ignore players like Son or Yaya Toure, even, then do so at your peril.
Yeah. And then fourthly, a bit of a silly one, but try and get that risk taker segment up on the old pie chart.
You mean the one that I still don't really understand what it means?
Yeah, exactly. I was like,
just trying. Try and
Just
get it up there.
yeah, try different things to see how I can get it up there. I do wonder if it is kind of based on just maybe hits. Maybe that's counted as a risk, which wouldn't play into my hands very well because I still try and be a bit risk averse to those. But yeah, I don't know.
Maybe as FPL review becomes more intuitive and maybe it intrudes on our lives a bit more. Maybe you could stop washing your hands before dinner and cross the road without looking, and that stat will fly up.
Yeah. What's the guy's name? Yeah, John's just got a camera on everyone's life, just assessing risk taker in some subjective way.
And he goes through everybody's days just to see how risky they are.
Yeah, move on to yours.
Yeah, let's do it.
Right, over to you.
So again, a lot of this seems quite obvious, but probably bears discussing or bears repeating. But not making emotional decisions. So there's quite a lot in this. Shlee and I have talked a bit about this while we've been podding, but we think even if you have a bad game week, maybe I shouldn't have wildcarded when I did because I'd had a couple of bad game weeks and maybe I'd have been better off just leaving the team and rolling that free transfer or just making a sensible free transfer and carrying on. But generally we don't make the best decisions when we're emotional about it, and we tend to be more emotional about it when we've had a bad game week, especially if we expected it to go pretty well. So I'm definitely going to try and learn from that. Last season, I managed to massively reduce the number of hits that I took and also the number of early transfers that I made, where I was trying to chase team value. So that's further down on the list. But that also goes to that emotional thing where if a player, has not done well for you for 2 or 3 game weeks, or you've captained somebody against the grain and it's hurt you really badly, the emotional thing can be like, I'm just going to rage, call it the rage transfer them out early, or, again, just make sure you're considering all the facts before you take decisions like that. Don't be fearful. Kind of the second part of that, I guess, fear is an emotion. And I think I certainly played kind of the end of the season more fearfully than I would have liked to, looking back. And that led to some, in hindsight, some quite poor decisions.
Do you think on that one, though, that is a rank-based thing? Like, would you be risky if you were like 50k in game week 34?
This is really interesting, isn't it? Because I think that's the other thing, and I think this is what Fabio does so well as well, is I don't think he thinks about his rank at any point. I think he just thinks, what's the best decision I can make this week? What's going to get me the most points? I don't get the feeling that he has a bad game week and then thinks, right, I need to change everything. He just he'll reset and take kind of very cold look at it and think, right, what's going to get me the best points moving forward in the next week, the next 2 game weeks, the next 3 game weeks. And so I don't think it should matter whether you're 50k or not, because yes, you can go against the grain, and yes, you might take a risky decision. But when you heard Jamie Piggott talk about why he took the decisions he took, it just all made perfect sense to me. I think if he had been rank 1 at the time in like game week 35, or 34, I don't think he would have necessarily made the same decisions. But he was just saying, right, I want to finish, I want to finish in the top 1k. And then sort of, he made those decisions. Instead of going for Salah, he went for Mane, and he also had De Bruyne. Instead of going for Trent, he had Matip. I just really liked his explanation as to why he did that. And obviously it worked out really, really well. But I'd like to think, because I don't think I'm going to be near the top 1k by game week 34 this season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how I react to that. But I hope that I just continue to try and make decisions that are the best decision at the time, rather than trying to make a decision to bump my rank up.
So I agree with everything you said there, but it did almost sound like you were talking as if it was situational. Jamie made those moves because he was 1k and thought, I want to be 1k, and I want to be first, and the only way I can do that is by taking risks. Whereas I think you're right in that Fabio wouldn't have done that. He would have been 1,000th, and he wouldn't have thought, I want to be first, because he's probably been top 10 once before, so he knows what that's like. He just thought, I'm just going to do the best thing. And at the time, he thought the best thing was to go quite risky. So I wonder if there's something in that where I think he maybe does change his strategy a little bit towards the end of the season and thinks this is now the time to be risky. I mean, late Roger, I think's mentioned this before. you chase the template in the first half of the season, and then you go more risky in the second. And surprise, surprise, that again that makes sense in my head because that's when I do often struggle. Well, certainly this season. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe there is a bit of a situational thing in terms of rank, but also maybe just a general thing that Fabio goes for it a bit more, and he feels his ability to pick those risky players is way better than everyone else's, and the best time to do that is at the end of the season, so he does it.
Yeah, maybe that there could definitely be something in that, but I also think that if he, he's always very, very consistent with those high ranks, and actually, if he was going riskier towards the end of the season, I think you're right. I think he does. I think he and Late Riser will both choose opportunities where they think they can go against the grain, and more often than not, it works out for them. Or if it doesn't work out, they've gone for it in a week where it doesn't hurt them as badly. But you think with Jamie, like if anything had gone against him in those moves he'd made, he wouldn't have been rank 1. But I think it was more, I think he would have made the same moves even if he'd been 50k. I mean, the fact that he made those moves, there would have been lots of other managers. In fact, I was probably one of them where because I was being fearful of dropping out of the top 10k or top 5k, because I was like, I'd really bought into being there this season. Whereas he was thinking, oh, I'm here, this is fine, but I'm going to see where I can go from here. Whereas I might try and do that if I'm 50k to try and jump down. I think what I'm saying is, I think trying to go risky because you think it's the best strategy generally, rather than thinking I'm going to go risky because I'm not happy with my current rank and I want to jumpstart it, is a good way to actually go to drop 50k rank rather than to fly up, because it can go just as badly as it can go well, right? So I think that's what I'm saying is, you're right, they may have different motivations, whereas I think what I'm going to try and do is just really objectively think, what is the best thing to do for, what's going to get me the most points in the upcoming game weeks. Because again, I stayed too wedded to Salah towards the end when it was clear that because I was fearful that if I took him out and then he went bananas, that would really, really damage me. I'd been saying I'm pretty sure he's tired, and his body language wasn't great, etc., etc. He followed up his AFCON loss in the final to Mane's winning penalty by by Egypt not qualifying to the World Cup again to a Mane penalty. So I think he was a bit mentally and physically shot towards the end of the season, and I shouldn't have been so wedded to him, I think is the lesson. But again, he could have showed up in any game, couldn't he, and gone mad. So
is there any part of you though that thinks that going against him game week 1 this season is the right thing to do?
So really interestingly, it is, and I am considering it. But do you remember I can't remember whether we discussed it on the pod last week or whether it's something we discussed another time. But I do think that is why people have a good season. Like almost after they have a great season, they can have a really terrible one. And I think it's because if they go close, and if they think back to kind of the end of the season when they thought, oh, maybe I should have been riskier, that kind of flows naturally into the game week 1 of the next season when they think, oh, I'm going to go a bit riskier. So I think, again, part of me will want to go without Salah, especially because he disappointed me so much towards the end of last season. But, he'll have had a couple of months off. He is one of the best players in the world. And so I probably should listen to the logic and make sure he's in my game week 1 team.
Yeah. Interesting.
So,
I think you're right.
Again, I could not have Salah and he goes absolutely mad, and suddenly I'm 3 millionth after the first game week. So
yeah,
there we go. But yeah, as you say, that's probably why it's much better to be template at the start, because you're just you're like a mile runner where you're just staying in the pack and making sure you're in the game and you're not out the race, and you can, when you hear the bell, you can be a bit riskier and push.
Yep.
So. Whereas not having Salah might be a way where I think I'm going to sprint off and try and beat everyone, and then they all catch me at the end. So I've probably done the running analogy to death there. So this second point I think is really, really important, especially for the start of a new season, is go for those established, proven Premier League players. So your De Bruyne's, your Salah's, your Son's, Kane's, they're established in their teams, they're in their prime. The likes of Kane and Son are the most nailed players pretty much in the game. That they're going to play 90 minutes in 95% of games. And again, the temptation will be, especially if he has a really good first fixture, and if his EO is massive, will be to go for Haaland. But I think you could go for Kane for not too much risk, because Haaland might smash a hat-trick on the first day, but Kane might get golden assist or a couple of goals, and so you're down on that, but you've taken a kind of slightly less risky pick there, but still with a pretty decent amount of upside. Now, obviously, if Kane's got Chelsea away first game and Haaland's got Bournemouth at home, then it's probably a pretty obvious pick. But I just think I need to try and focus on these established, proven Premier League players, because there's been too much in the past of players who've come in and they've just kind of let us down. So, and then, I mean, again, that seems very obvious, but number 3, give players time. So, think back to kind of those Gallagher hauls that I managed to hit. I think in previous seasons I would have just jettisoned him out of the team after his kind of third blank in a row, but I saw good fixtures coming and thought he's still a very good player, and maybe the 2 or 3 blanks he had were against better teams, so managed to still hit some pretty good scores. And I think if it's that thing again where if you have a bad week, the temptation is to take a hit or two to try and fix things, but actually the players who've just had a bad week last week, they're more incentivized to have a good week next week, and maybe their fixtures are different or better, and it's just maybe don't mess with things too much, and give people a bit more time, and hope they'll come good. And all of a sudden, if a player's blank 2 or 3 games in a row and then they hit a couple of goals in the next game, suddenly you've got a player that you're about to take out, and now all of a sudden he's in form, and you're kind of excited about his next fixture.
I think that number 3, I think the best example in your team would be Ronaldo. He, for sure, established, proven in their prime, who aren't minutes risk. Okay, the last bit is a minutes risk. I mean, Gallagher, though, he's not an established, proven Premier League player, is he? But he was on that sort of cusp of a wave short term. So I think that's maybe where we need to maybe add that little factor in. But, that's a bit more of a gut feel and eye testing, isn't it? It's very hard to write that in words.
Yeah, and I think that's why I put them mainly on there, because there are always going to be these players that you look at and think, actually, this person's a bit special, or they're going to, like, you think when players like Kane came into the Spurs team at 4.5, when Trent came into the Liverpool defence at 4.5. Again, if you see something in these players, I think the thing for Gallagher, the thing that made me bring him in was seeing the highlights of game week 3, when I can't remember who he got the 2 goals against, but he got 2 goals, and one of them was where Cruyff turned in literally in like the 6-yard box, to have the time and the calmness to Cruyff turn in the box, where anyone else would probably have just been trying to swing a leg at it. And he's there, Cruyff turning the whole defense. And I think like the keeper and 2 defenders went the other way, and he just then passed it into an open net. So it's things like that where you see it, think, okay, this guy's playing for Crystal Palace, but he's got a bit about him. So good to see that sort of stuff. And then, so, you think about there's people talking about kind of Eze, and I can't remember the other lad's name at Palace. You might remember Shlee, but
I know what you mean. There's so many like flary attacking midfield players coming through.
Yeah, but those sorts of players, again, if you see that they've got good fixtures and their prices are good, then they're the kind of players that, when I say mainly, if you can sprinkle a couple of those players into your team, they're going to be massive differentials and a way to and enablers as well with their prices, and so they might be a good way to jump up a bit. Don't make early transfers. Team value is not as important as some people think. I used to believe massively in team value, because I used to love that moment in the second half of the season when I had wildcard and I could build a wildcard team that no one else could afford. But the points that I'd probably lost in hits, and the points I probably lost in bringing in players who then maybe they got injured, or they weren't the best move by the time we got all the information later in the week, just to be able to get, I can stretch to getting that third big hitter for the last, 5 game weeks. It just isn't. I just think it's a bit of a, it's a bit of a misnomer. I don't think it really works as well as you think. As good as it feels in the moment, it's kind of what you've missed out on. So, and this season I had a much better season. I didn't take as many hits, certainly in the first half of the season, and my team value wasn't anywhere near as high. But there wasn't a point where I thought, I wish it was higher. It's still pretty good, just because the players I picked had done well, but I wasn't jumping around just to maintain team value. You've always been very good at that, Shlee, in terms of just making sure you're making the transfers at sensible times and not jumping in. And
yeah, but I think that the goalposts there have changed, and that I think gone are the days, unfortunately, of that volatile, predictable price changes. I think now they've dampened it down quite a bit, haven't they? And they've maybe changed the algorithm to make it harder to guess. So I think there's less incentive to do that, which in a way is more annoying. I think people obviously would then think, right, well, I need to get on it even earlier because it's harder to get that value. But yeah, I think if we have another COVID-y type season, then I think it's just even more of a no-brainer to wait. And it got to the stage where my brain just wasn't even tempted to even look. I think at the beginning of the season, maybe you and I did a little bit, and obviously we did that chart last week that sort of showed it. But yeah, it just got so normal to do it Friday evening or either just before deadline, which I didn't enjoy for sure, because I think that just added to the stress. I think if you can do it Friday night and wake up Saturday on a Saturday deadline, if it is, and you know you haven't really got to think about FPL, that's so nice. But having to be near your phone and monitor it up against the deadline isn't great for everyone's mental health, I don't think, long term. So
no, indeed. In fact, you're absolutely right. Thinking about it, one of the big changes this season were those, was the COVID news and it coming very late sometimes, and whole games being called off. And I think that made a massive difference in me not making early transfers, because it just felt so risky, so much more risky than it had ever felt before.
yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. The other point was there were nights where I was looking at it kind of 12:30 and seeing that a player was like, he was 101. I was thinking, this is a player that I want. And yeah, I didn't do it. And then in the morning I'd look and he'd be down at like 80 and he hadn't moved. And you're like, so if I can't even rely on this information, it is complete guesswork. So yeah, I think that was the other thing. Because you're right. Back in 3-4 years ago, players would rise like 0.3 in a week, wouldn't they? If they had a good game week, they'd absolutely
does
fire.
seem
And
to
it
be
just
at least
doesn't
0.2.
happen.
Yeah, gone. The good old days of you'd wild card and you'd get quite a lot of team value if you did it right. I just think it's almost impossible now. You get a few 0.1s and that's it. It seems to be.
Yeah. In fact, I actually screwed up on my wild card because I had he who shall not be named, Mason Greenwood, in there, and I had him in an early draft, took him out, then wanted him on the wild card, but I'd lost 0.1 on him. And I was like, you absolute rookie, losing 0.1 on a player like that. But as you say, you kind of move players around in and out thinking, and they go up by 0.1 and you don't even want them in your wild card. And you're like, well, I've got to keep them in case they go up by that extra point, that extra 0.1, and it doesn't happen. But yeah, it used to be able to make huge amounts of team value, didn't you? So that's probably the other reason why I don't do it anymore, because there's no real gain in it.
Fabio's thread is really really opinionated on this. I think he just goes almost as much to say, I don't even look at it I don't even look at what my transfer might be. Like, say, I don't know, Son's absolutely killing it in game week 33 and he hasn't got him, and he's got, I don't know, Havertz. I would think on Sunday, can I afford Havertz to Son? But I get the impression that Fabio doesn't even look at that, and if he was 0-0, he would let it go until Friday at least. Look at the press conferences, and then if he can't afford it and he's 0.1 off, poker face, he wouldn't get the slightest bit angry somehow, and he'd just get Kulu in or something. He's very much, I think, said quite a few times, if you can't afford it, you just then need to look for the next option, or you get Maddison, or you get whoever else genius pick that seems to be on the radar. It's a very clever, very brave way of looking at it, but if you could do that consistently, what a brilliant way to play it.
Yeah, and I think that's I haven't got that on this list, but that is certainly something I've thought about recently, is that there is always another way.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like you're at 0-0 and you're like, I've just got to have this team. I've got to have this team, but there is always another way to make it work.
Yeah.
And so by letting it go, you are, maybe that other way that you were completely discounting is like, no, that's not the right way to do it. Maybe that way is better, and you just haven't given it enough thought. But by letting the decision ride, you're then actually removing some of your options, which feels bad, but again, you just find that other way to do it. So,
but then it's so easy for me to say that if I had 0-0 and I just seen Son get what was probably 15, 12, 15, and I didn't get him in, and then he goes and does it again,
And
That's
you're
the sort of
and
thing.
you're then 0.1 off.
Yeah, I'm 0.1 off, so I've then got to take a hit to get him in next week, having lost out 15 points. That's probably what drove me to the game week 24 wildcard. I can't remember, but I think there was some sort of events like that where I was just like completely chasing things from 3 or 4 weeks that I just never seem to be on top of, and just getting really annoyed. And here comes the emotion. Yeah, you just like sod this.
Here comes the emotion.
Fabio's just there, cool as a cucumber, with his 0-0, just riding out.
That's also the thing, though, isn't it? Because as you say, when things are going well, everything's going in the right direction. Your team value's growing. The players who you haven't got aren't doing anything. Their value's dropping. Everything seems easy, and then but it is those times when it's not going so well. I really, really hope that we can carry some of this through in the next season. If one of us has a really bad game week, I'd love to try just not making a transfer, just rolling it.
Yeah.
Seeing how it goes.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. I still think I definitely think, say, taking a hit is very risky. I think a free transfer, if there is an obvious one, say you go with Lukaku,
It depends
it
obviously depends on the context, depends on the fixtures and everything
Yeah.
else, depends on whether there are any fixture swings. But do you remember when we discussed it and we said, look, the next week you'd come back, you'd have 2 free transfers. You'd be like, right, let's see what we're going to do with this. I mean, it would be a nice way to do it, I think. Another thing that wasn't on this list is that I really enjoy doing is getting into that rhythm of rolling a transfer and then using 2 or 3.
Yeah.
That's such a nice rhythm to get into. And towards the end of the season, I was just chasing all the time, taking hits most weeks to keep up with the doubles and players I didn't have and blanks and things like that. But at the start of the season, I'm going to really try and establish that pattern of the roll and then the kind of mini wild card, as we call it.
Just a very random thought that this is probably a terrible example of why you should maybe go with your gut and take that transfer. Let's say you got off to a bad game week 1 last season, and you see Ben Rama getting 12 points in game week 1, and I get off to a bad week, and you're like, don't make a transfer, Shlee, it's fine. Ben Rama's not going to go nuts again, and I've got whoever I had, and it's an easy switch. It's a very specific thing. Do you know what I mean? And Ben Rama obviously then went on to have a very average season.
It's very specific. When one of my strongest FPL memories is bringing in Agazi for West Brom, which I've spoken about several times. But as in, you're right. I mean, but Ben Rama then, he did really well for 2 or 3 games, but he then went off the map, didn't he? So if he hadn't even done well for those 2 or 3 game weeks, you've just brought in that game week 1 player, you're chasing points, and he's not actually going to set the world on fire. So
yeah, and again, that was probably very contextual. Maybe West Ham had really good fixtures, and he was playing, I don't know, number 10 role, and that wasn't going to be there forever, but a good short-term move. But I think there are sometimes those short-term moves that you've got to take.
But we could go back and look, right? Because in game week 3, I mean, I've just said like Gallagher got 2 goals. I mean, I don't think there'd be much in game week 1 and 2 that would make you get Gallagher, but maybe with your 2 free transfers in game week 3, you'd bring in 2 brilliant picks.
Yeah.
So it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
This thing. They're so context dependent, aren't they? So
yeah.
And then the last one is just, I've found it so useful. As we've said, I don't find the time to watch anywhere near as much football as I would like to watch. And yet by listening to various different FPL podcasts, and there's so much content out there, there'll be 100 podcasts that are probably amazing that I don't even know about. But actually just by listening to different people talk about who do watch a lot more football than I do, who talk about players and, it's Michael Elise, isn't it? That's the player from Palace that we forgot. But because I can just hear James from Planet FPL talking about him and cooing about how great he is. But just that thing of, I probably wouldn't even know who Michael Elise was if I hadn't been listening to Planet FPL. And then, the FPL Wire and Andy and Focal and Raptor and all these, like there's so much content out there, and obviously Black Box with those guys. So that has been hugely, hugely helpful to me recently is being able to listen to those guys when I'm short on time, I'm on the move, I can listen to it rather than having to watch something. And it just puts all this information into my head, and then my brain kind of processes it. And then by the time it comes to a deadline, I've got an idea about what I'm going to do. And, generally I'm making decisions with a lot of information there.
Yeah, sorry, I got the giggles a little bit when you were talking about that, because it sounded like a little bit that you had Planet FPL in another ear that I can't see, and they just happened to be talking about Crystal Palace and mentioned Elise, and then you were like, oh yeah, I can just hear,
Yes,
I can hear James in my ear saying about Elise.
No, I haven't got the headphones in. You can see this.
Very good. Okay, fine. I'll let you off. But yeah, no, I like that one. It's kind of a good feeling one, that, isn't it? That it is nice to, it's a nice way to ingest stuff for sure. And like you say, with a busy lifestyle, there are answers out there that are quite nice to digest in that way.
Interesting that neither of us have mentioned, the kind of the algorithms and the bots that are telling us how people can make decisions and which transfer to make. And just, I think we'll probably be seen as quite old school players in the next few seasons, Shlee, because maybe we'll start looking at that stuff, but maybe we'll shy away from it. But
yeah, maybe. Interesting. I mean, we could look to sanity check transfers with that, but I very much think it would have to be I don't think I would go into many weeks looking at I'm not an optimizer and going with it. I think it would be, all right, the optimizer says this, I'm going to bank that memory and see if it comes good a few times, and then see, because as I quoted last week, as I think said that if you'd followed FPL review free model, you would have come 200th, but I might have got that completely wrong, and maybe that was way off, and maybe that was if you followed it 90% of the time, but obviously they don't tell you when to do chips. You have to input those things, so I think you've got to be a little bit careful how you use them.
Yeah, fair enough. No, maybe good. I haven't even seen FPL review in terms of using it for recommended transfers or things like that. I think with FPL review, you could go on there and do what I do a lot on live FPL, where you can plan your game week and obviously click it through to different game weeks. But I don't think it saves on FPL review, which is why I didn't use it.
Right. I think you can do that, yeah, and maybe you're right, but its main power is you can press a button and it says, I think you should do these transfers, and this is the number of points I expect you to gain.
So I haven't. Yeah, I didn't know it did that. Maybe I would have come top 1K if I'd actually found that button.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I'll still probably use FPL.team. But yeah, like you say, that sort of forward thinking. I mean, that's a new thing I think this season, isn't it? Certainly, Ragabody jumped on the back of FPL team because it was, and now almost can't think of life without it. Being able to look ahead like that, it's so useful.
You mean do you use live FPL or FPL.team?
FPL.team.
Okay.
Just sort of started it with the first one, but I know you're sort of so fluent with live FPL that you use that one, and fair play.
Yeah. Did you say Ragabody jumps? Oh, he jumped on that feature and has now incorporated it into
I think
live
so.
FPL,
I think he did it soon after FPL.team did it. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was the other way around. In which case, yeah, apologies. But I thought that sort of snazzy new interface, it looks very much like the FPL side, doesn't it, on FPL.team?
Yeah.
Anyway.
The FPL review is another one, a separate one that does the same thing.
I don't think it's as visual like that. I think it's more of a blocks of players, and you can see where they sort of link between each other. But I don't think that's the main feature of that site anyway. Yeah, it's more that there's a model there, and it'll then optimize your transfers.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
yeah.
Thank you for this. Thank you again for the prep. Those graphs and chip stuff was amazing. So it's good that you're getting the credit you deserve on Twitter. Making some new friends.
Small growth, but yeah, a few followers and stuff off the back of that, so that was nice. Will you be then? Yeah, we were speaking beforehand. I just thought end on one question. Will you be refreshing your team on the deadline, on the release date, if we know to get a low ID?
Yeah, I think I will. If we know when it is and if work isn't too insane. I think last year I was kind of I had it on my phone and was kind of just pressing refresh every few minutes in between things, and managed to get a reasonably low one. But I'm not going to be. I think I'm actually off that day if it is next Wednesday. But I'm looking after the kids, so I'll probably be even less able to press the refresh button. So because they'll be shouting at me and telling me off for being on my phone.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the same. I think if I know in advance, and actually maybe you've been on that Slack channel, it'd be quite handy, because if you don't know in advance, you're probably going to know pretty soon after and still get a decent one. Whereas not part of anything like that. So I think it might be either quite a low one, or I just might let it ride and just get a 2 million or something. Not be that bothered.
That Slack channel is amazing for that sort of stuff. Those guys are so. It was quite sweet actually, because at the end of the season there was a bit of a love in on that chat about everybody just kind of praising each other and thanking each other. And it's, the people who are active on there, because they are so engaged, such engaged managers, and a lot of them are very, very good, have very good ranks, good rank histories. But you just get so much information from there, because they're just distilling everything down. They're finding all this information. They're on FPL Twitter. They're listening to stuff, and then they just, I don't. It's just nice, kind of sending stuff into that group and feeling like you're contributing. And I guess everyone feels the same. But if you can become part of one of those, it's very, very useful. And it's good when on match days, because people are pinging messages about goals and assists and everything else way before kind of the BBC, you're getting the notifications, or the BBC website has it. So it's pretty cool.
Yep. Nice. Okay. Yep. Thanks for that, Nick. Nice one. And we will be back next week probably, where we're going to have fixtures and maybe even the game launched. We'll see. But that's all going to change pretty soon, isn't it?
It'd be amazing if we could do one on the evening when the game launches, just to kind of do an initial look and initial take of it. I'm pretty excited about it now. It'd be lovely to do a full season of this if we can keep it going.
Yeah, sure. Oh, an hour of tinkering next week for sure, at least from you. You're absolutely loving that.
Just go through Praz's list of emotions and drafts, just absolutely to the letter. Go and have a look at that, Shlee. It'll crack you up.
Okay, nice. Right, not just now, definitely bedtime, but soon. Thanks everyone for listening. If you enjoyed what you have seen and heard, give it a like, give it a share, and subscribe, comment as well. And thanks again, Nick. See ya.
Thanks, bye bye.